My name is Naomi Fitzgibbon, and I am the Director of Nursing Services with the Irish Motor Neuron Disease Association. And I have Lesley Doyle with me, and also I have Lisa and Paula who work in our services team. And I'm just going to wait a few minutes for people to join. And what we'll do is then we will get going. I'm going to do a short introduction to the Irish Motor Neuron Disease Association so you all know what we do and who we are, and then I'll hand over to Lesley. So just while people are joining, I'm going to give a little introduction to Lesley. She qualified from Limerick as a speech and language therapist in 2006 and became the senior SLT in neurology in Beaumont in 2010. And she is working with people with progressively neurological conditions, um, aims to forward planning and maximizing current quality of life. Leslie's developed an interest in new technologies and how they can support people and their goals. She was the clinical lead in the SLT team who developed the Irish Message Banking Toolkit, and the toolkit has been endorsed by the IASLT and contains a detailed guide on message banking as well as some voice banking resources. Leslie's currently on a career break from Beaumont Hospital, having joined the academic unit of neurology and the School of Medicine in Trinity College Dublin. And as a research assistant in November 2002, she's undertaking her PhD with the Miranda program, which is a HRB clinical doctorate awarded funded program that focuses on exploring how digital technology can potentially enhance and care for people living with MND. As you are probably aware, and Lesley will go through this in great detail, the importance of preserving people's voice, particularly for the MND community. And that's why we've asked Lesley to do this presentation for us today. So I'm just going to do a short introduction to the IMNDA. So if you just bear with me now, I'll share this screen. Just bear with me now. Sorry, it's misbehaving. Got it now, sorry. Okay. Now, can everybody see that? Yeah. So you're going to hear from Lesley after me, and myself and Paula and Lisa, who work for the IMNDA. So just really to start off, to give you some background, the IMNDA was established in 1983 by a small group of friends. It is a national service and has a nursing service, provides equipment, grants, financial assistance as well for people and their families living with motor neuron disease. We received 15% of our funding from the government, and the rest is fundraised by our fundraising department. And we also have a communication department that supports us as well. So as you can see here, our vision, a world free of MND, and our mission and our values these are all available on our website as well for you, but we are evidence-based service. So the role of the IMNDA is to improve symptoms for people living with motor neuron disease and try and anticipate their needs, avoid crisis, adapt to their environment and maintain their independence, promoting their autonomy, ensuring they have dignity and enhance their quality of life as much as possible. We currently have 6 nurses working in the team, and they're based around the country, and here are their faces. We have Moira, Ethna, Fidelma, Catherine, Louise, and Anya. We support 450 people living with motor neuron disease in Ireland at the moment and their families. One person is diagnosed every 3 days. One person also passes away every 3 days, unfortunately. We also do huge amount of support for families, for carers, and as we're doing today, for healthcare professional education. Really, we are working as part of the multidisciplinary team that supports people with MND, and we have a very much a team approach with the nursing and the services team with Paula and Lisa. We can't we can't work without each other, so we have to work very closely together, and we do. And we really want to have prompt intervention. We're trying to be as flexible as possible with frequent assessments. And the nurses attend the MDTs in Beaumont, in Cork, in Galway, Kerry, and I believe there's a MDT being set up in Waterford as well. And they're also integrated into the community and the MDTs in the community. We have a case management model. We have a clinical advisory group which advises us on clinical issues related to people living with MND, and Lesley is on that panel. And also Moira Hayes is on the committee of the Irish Neurology Nursing Forum. So as you can see, the nursing team and the services team are really at the very start when people are diagnosed. We're right there with them to support them until they don't need us anymore, right to the end of care, or when they just don't want to engage with us anymore. And people will register with us. They don't have to register with us, but we really hope that they do so we can connect in with them, the multidisciplinary team, and ensure that they're getting the best care that is available. So just a real quick snapshot of how we supported people last year. So this is from our annual report. So you can see we had 18,500 inquiries with the nursing team. There were nearly 800 visits, home visits, 120 professional education. So that could be the nurses going into nursing homes or hospice or hospitals to give education on how to support people living with their disease. And also the services team will do education days like today, ensuring that the healthcare services know how we operate and what services we can provide as well. We're also supporting family and then the healthcare professionals. And just to show you how much we spent on equipment last year, it's nearly, it's over 750,000. So it is a huge service that we are providing, because we know how important it is that people get their equipment as soon as possible when they're living with MND, because time is of the essence. So I just said there about the huge budget. At the moment there are over 300, and I think it's 50 pieces of specialist equipment that we have now, and it will range from anything from comfort seating to eye gaze to assistive technology to the voice banking. And we collaborate with various different organizations to help us provide this information. And that is Healthcare 21, who really are incredible at looking after our equipment and making sure it's contaminated, it's working, it's up to date, and looking at mobility, beds, communication aids, and also stair lifts. We also have home care grants, and that's to make sure that people can stay at home for as long as possible. We have a counselling grant for people living with motor neuron disease and their family, and a holistic therapy grant. And all of these grants can be applied through the nurses. I'm sure most of you are aware around Charlie Bird and the incredible fundraising he did along with Pieta House, and that raised vital funds for the Irish motor neuron disease. So out of that fund, we are able to, we did a survey to see what people really needed. And we have the sixth nurse, which was really, really needed for the community of people living with motor neuron disease. So that means that the nurses can get to people more often in a more timely fashion. We also contribute fund from that Charlie Bird Development Fund to Professor Orla Hardiman for some of her research. We fund voice banking. We have a recharge grant, transport grant, and we're working on a caregiver respite grant at the moment. And all of the information around those grants is on our website. So just around the research, we did a survey with MND Scotland in 2023 as well, and it was sent to people living with motor neuron disease, their family, and bereaved, and we had 360 responses, which Trinity are analysing for us at the moment. So we fund some research with Professor Hardiman, that is the TriCals project that she's running. Also fund a research fellow, and we also invested to over just under 250,000 in the Lighthouse trials, which Professor Hardiman is running. I'm not sure if this video is going to work. It didn't the last time. We're going to try it again. It's just really the experience of somebody who is engaged with our services. on how they engage with the nursing team, the services team. So hopefully it'll play. I'm sorry about the sound on that, but at least it's subtitled, so you could get a sense of what Paul, his video is on the YouTube channel. And if you go into the IMNDA, and feel free to use that as well if you like to, because it's a wonderful, I suppose, experience of Paul and how he's living with his motor neuron disease. So I am going to hand over to Lesley now, and take it away there, Lesley.
Hello, everybody. Well, thank you to the IMNDA for asking me to participate in this today, because voice banking was something that I was very involved with clinically, and it's great to be able to share information with people who are interested. And I know it's something that can be quite challenging for people as well, because it's quite technical. Can you see my screen there? Will you give me a nod, Naomi? Great. Okay. So voice banking is something that traditionally is led by speech and language therapists to give the really detailed information or to help a person through the process. But for any of us who are healthcare professionals, if we're meeting someone with MND, it's very useful for us all to be aware of what is voice banking or how to point somebody in the direction of the right information. So today we have all kinds of healthcare professionals with us. So what I'm going to do for the first half is just give kind of overview information of ways to bank speech, what it all means, how a person can do it. And then we'll stop, we'll take some questions, and then we're going to look specifically at Speak Unique, because that's the service that's favoured by the IMNDA with the grant. So if anybody who maybe isn't necessarily going to work through the process with somebody who wants to drop off at that point, you're welcome to do so. So the week before last, we had a study day in Trinity on M&D, and I pulled some information from the register which I thought might be useful for today as well. So in all the cases of M&D that we have in Ireland since the register started in about 1994, a third of people when they were diagnosed had no bulbar symptoms. So that means they had no symptoms of speech or swallow difficulty that we call dysarthria and dysphagia. So another third of people only had bulbar symptoms, so either dysarthria or dysphagia, and then the final third had both bulbar and other symptoms like spinal or respiratory symptoms. So we can see here from this figure that dysarthria is much more likely to be the initial bulbar symptom for people who are diagnosed. But over the course of the condition, up to 80% of people will develop some kind of dysarthria. And the difficult thing with M&D is that we can't really predict for any person how bad it's going to get. We know if someone has bulbar onset, it's more likely it's going to get severe and get there faster. But the reason why people might choose to bank their voice is because it's called a vocal insurance. So we don't know what's necessarily going to happen for them, but they have an option there of using the voice in the future if it ever does deteriorate to the point of needing an electronic communication system. So I'm going to play this video. Sorry to anybody who's familiar with this or watched this at our study day, but it's a 3-minute video, and it was developed as part of the Irish message banking project that I was part of. And the idea behind this is a quick and easy intro that we can direct people to if they just want an overview of what recording is about. So it covers the general terms of message banking and voice banking. And I'm just going to check my sharing and see, do I have, just going to share the sounds there. Okay.
We all communicate in lots of different ways: speaking, writing, body language, and increasingly with the phones in our pockets.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to get rid of the share.
These days, using technology is a key way to keep in touch, but it can also help if your speech changes and can be very simple or a little complex, depending on how techy you want to get. Some medical conditions cause changes to how speech sounds. Speech can become hard to understand, or a person might lose the ability to speak. If this happens, a speech and language therapist can work with you to help you choose an alternative communication system. This might be everyday technology like a smartphone or tablet that can speak out messages for you using computerized voices that are easy to understand but can sound a little robotic and not like yourself. Our voices are a unique part of who we are. For this reason, some people choose to plan ahead and capture their speech by making some recordings when it is still strong and easy to understand. We'll talk about 2 different methods. One way is to record yourself speaking personally meaningful phrases in your own voice, a process called message banking. This allows you to capture your unique voice, your personality, your accent, and turns of phrase used in your part of the country. You might want to be able to tell people close to you how you feel about them, read a bedtime story in your own voice, or just recount your best tales and crack. If in the future you choose to use technology for communication, these messages can be built in and will sound exactly like you when played. Another method is voice banking. This is where you use the service of a commercial company to help you to create your own unique computerized voice. This personalized voice can then be used instead of the standard digital voice on a computer to speak out whatever you type as you think of them in conversation. This computerized voice will sound similar to you, but would always sound somewhat robotic compared to natural speech. The best time to do any recording is when your voice is clear and easy to understand. Your voice might change over time, so you may want to make recordings now. If the idea of making recordings doesn't appeal to you, you still have lots of options for using technology to communicate. Your speech and language therapist can help you along the way. If you haven't yet met a speech and language therapist, you can ask your doctor or other healthcare professional.
Okay, sorry there for stopping and starting. I was trying to move the share bar that's across the front of my screen. So that video is up on, it's on YouTube. You can find it by just searching message banking. It was part funded by Research Motor Neurone, so it's up on the RMN website, so either IMNDA or RMN.ie under clinical related support, and there's a message and voice banking tab. And under there, we also have a series of handouts about message banking and voice banking. So message banking is a more complex process, and voice banking is a different way to record, as you've heard there. So there's an overview handout of what the difference between the two is. So if you meet somebody and they're just looking for a little bit of information, this can be a good thing to either direct them to on the website or give them a printed copy if they can have a read of it and come back to it. So message banking and voice banking are the two umbrella terms, but within each, there's a couple of subtypes. So voice banking is what we traditionally mean by somebody records a sample of their speech that can be then used to make electronic versions of their voice. It's kind of called voice cloning sometimes. What voice repair is, it's a version of voice banking for people who've already experienced some dysarthria. So their speech has already started to deteriorate. So their recordings are blended with those of the donor speaker, and it can smooth out any imprecision or breathiness that they have. So the donor speaker will be on file recordings that the company has. And then voice design is a term specific to Speak Unique that they use, but this is for people who are maybe now anarthrics, they have no functional speech, or they just happen to have maybe some old recordings that the company can use those recordings to make a voice for them. So that's a little bit more case by case, because it very, very much depends on the quality and the nature of the recordings. But you can also then get somebody else to bank on your behalf or use their on file recordings of somebody with a similar accent as well. So there's a few options to create your own personal synthesized voice. Message banking then is when people, as you heard in the video, they record personally meaningful phrases. And then there's one final one of legacy recordings where maybe a person doesn't want to use them for two-way communication, but when they start recording and they're capturing their unique voice, they start to realize that they'd actually like to maybe retell life stories, and they might be for family members they want to leave them. Sometimes it's even a spoken letter or poems or prayers. So when you're doing recording, a lot of us know about the Zoom dictaphone recordings. They're just what you'd use for message banking. You wouldn't need one of those for voice banking. You can do legacy recording on anything. A person can do it on their own tablet or iPhone. If you happen to have a Zoom, you can record audio files on a Zoom, but the Zoom is just for message banking. What you need for voice banking is a microphone. So with something like this, a microphone headset, and we'll talk about that a bit more. So for the final, when you have finished these and you're using them, what you would use your synthesized voice that you've made for your voice banking, voice repair, voice design is on an electronic communication device that has some kind of app or software specific to communication. You type in your message, and then there's always some kind of speak button like there is here. So all these devices have a built-in voice, but you can download and use your own in place of the built-in one. And then message banking would be used in a different way if you pre-save in your phrases and you press one cell and they speak out. So legacy recordings, as we said, aren't necessarily designed to go onto a system like this, but some people like to have them and you put them on it that way. Often when we talk to people about voice banking, they make an association in their head, and if we're talking to people at M&D, they associate it with eye gaze, and the two aren't associated, but I think what people are thinking is if my communication is very impaired, I might be physically impaired. So voice banking would be a just kind of your voice output that you would use on a communication system, and something like eye gaze or head mounts or switches are a way to control those devices. So they're not directly linked, but if a person was picking a communication device in the future, it would be a consideration of, well, what type of voice banking have you done? What is it compatible with? What type of access method do you need? So is it direct or another method? So they're part of the considerations, but not actually linked. But because that is something that often people will ask about when they're thinking about it, we do have it in this toolkit handout on what does it mean to use technology for communication. So again, that can kind of be useful to people to give them a sense, because very often people haven't encountered anybody who uses a communication device before. Okay, so these are, when we're thinking about why might somebody want to record, these are the perspectives of people diagnosed with IMND. This first one is Father Tony Coote, who some of you might remember or have seen his fundraising campaign, Walk While You Can, and a documentary was made about this, and this is just the promo clip for it.
One of the things I will face, that people face, is I lose my voice. And your voice is so much connected to your identity. I think psychologically that'll be a mind bend beyond what I could comprehend, not to be able to hear my own voice. And then I imagine you become less relevant. And that's why time is of the essence, I know that. And that's why I'm using my voice for this. While I can, I will.
So I don't think any of us who are here now, who are healthcare professionals, would imagine that a person with MND would become less relevant if they couldn't communicate verbally. But that is a fear that people have, and it is an experience of some people that if they are adults who have been speakers and now they need to use some other form of communication, sometimes people who are strangers to them may interpret that they have an intellectual disability. And some people with MND have reported that being able to use a device that has an element of their own voice just kind of validates them and who they are as a person. This one here, the other video, is Richard Cave, who's an SLT in the UK who specialises in voice banking, and he is speaking to Dr. Turner, who is a GP who was diagnosed with MND, and he has done voice banking and he's using voice banking in his.
And just so,
there.
If it's okay, David, I'm going to hand over to you.
Hello, I am David Turner, a 56-year-old GP and Dexinus. I was diagnosed with motor neurone disease early last year and retired soon after. I had experienced progressive right hand weakness a few months before. No one had noticed the deterioration in my handwriting as I was a doctor. My wife thought I was putting it on, but then my wife has never really understood me. The disease progressed at a steady pace, so that now I cannot use my arms, and I cannot walk. My voice started to become slurred 6 months ago, especially when tired. Now people have difficulty understanding what I am saying. Swallowing is generally okay if I avoid certain foods. Model Talker is an easy and free way of recording and synthesizing your own voice for future use for when you are unable to speak clearly. It can be done in your own time and in your own home. It's not perfect, but your synthesized voice is recognizable as your own voice. It's important to emphasize the need to record or bank your voice early.
And just
Sorry. So I think from that one, he mentioned using Model Talker. That's a different type of voice banking company. He mentioned it being free, but they do charge for it now. So he says it's not perfect, but it's recognizable as your voice. So I think we can all tell that sounds like a person's voice. Some of the other points that he made about it's important to get it done early, that's definitely a key message, because we know that people's speech is going to deteriorate over time. He did say that he only started to notice a slur about 6 months previously. So that's obviously very rapid to be using such a communication system as complex as what he has. That's not typical for people with MND, because we don't there is no typical, so it's hard to know the time frame. But he is a good example of a voice banking user. So why might people do it or be suitable for this or not? So people might be interested if their speech is intelligible. So there is the option to use previous recordings, but usually voice banking is done making recordings now. So even if your speech is dysarthric, it needs to be intelligible. If a person wants to maintain that element of their personality that's captured in their voice, if they see it as positive and they want to be proactive and want to plan ahead. So voice banking, you don't have to do voice banking because we know there are those inbuilt voices for any kind of system. So it's just for somebody to make an option for themselves in the future. And what we mean by option is then they can choose to use their voice instead of the built-in voice. We know with IMND that loss of control is so difficult for people to manage, and being able to decide that I'm going to record my speech, I'm going to have an electronic version there on hand, it gives people back some sense of control. Not everybody wants to do it though. In the last few years, it's been much more popular than it previously would have been. But some people just really don't like how their speech sounds. They never did. Most of us, when we hear recording of ourselves, cringe a little bit and we don't like it. But maybe if your communication has changed, you don't want to record it as it is. Some people feel very upset by the idea of trying to put themselves in the headspace of what if this did impact on my communication to the point where I couldn't speak. Some people just don't want to know anything about communication devices, and you kind of do need to have some sense of what they are and how they work to know how voice banking might work. While some people want to plan ahead, there are people who say, I just want to focus on what's currently a symptom. My speech might always be fine, so I don't want to give any energy or headspace to that. Or maybe someone's just been diagnosed, or they're trying to get things in place, equipment for other symptoms, and now isn't a suitable time. So that doesn't mean they don't want to ever do it, but we might just need to revisit it and pause it for now. No one should ever feel pressured or stressed into doing it because it is optional. And sometimes people tell us that they think if they couldn't speak, that they would just prefer to use handwriting. So that obviously depends on good hand dexterity, but some people just know that they wouldn't like to use something with voice output. So all those things that have to come together, there's a window where things overlap. A few years back, we used to miss that window quite a lot because maybe the awareness wasn't so great, or the technology was a bit more overwhelming. But in recent years, most of us are healthcare professionals have heard of voice banking. And also Charlie Bird in his campaign put voice banking into the mainstream media. So it's a little bit more or less overwhelming as an idea. A few years back, myself and Caroline Jago did some focus groups of people who'd done message banking because that was more popular at the time. But there's a couple of things that apply to us as healthcare professionals about what people with IMND would like from us to help them with this. So the first key point is that people with IMND thought everybody should be made aware of it. Sometimes that can feel a bit challenging if you're afraid that you're going to upset someone by bringing it up, but it'd be worse for somebody not to know about it and then they miss the window if it was something important to them. So just even starting the conversation of saying this might be difficult to think about, but it's important that you know in case you're interested. People with IMND didn't think that it was necessarily an SLT who had to raise the subject. They felt that it would be quite appropriate for any healthcare professional to say, have you heard about voice banking? Is it something you'd be interested in? Give them a little bit of a couple of lines and then direct them to a speech therapist. So either a speech therapist in one of the IMND clinics, their HSC therapist, or if they're already linked with the assistive technology service in the CRC or any assistive technology service. Involving family is good. Presenting it as achievable and focusing on the information. So rather than kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of this model of headset and this type of computer, of just what is it and what would you use it for? And people like the idea of a demo. So some SLTs, we might have an example on a device, but otherwise all of the companies have samples up on their websites where they'll show you what a person's recording was and what the resulting voice was. So that's useful for people to see. People did say that they thought information about recording when they got it would depend on whether they had dysarthria or not when they were diagnosed. So the people with IMND we spoke to said that if someone has dysarthria when they're diagnosed, we should be telling them about the options to bank their speech as soon as we can. If they don't have dysarthria, that maybe it might be better just to leave it until even the second, third time that you meet them, because it's overwhelming to people who are trying to get their head around other symptoms like their physical symptoms or rest symptoms. This quote from somebody said after their initial diagnosis that they were lost and it came as such a shock. So if they'd been asked about it then, they would have said no, and that was a person with spinal onset MND. But the feedback that they did give us, and this is one probably more specific to SLTs, is that once a person has decided that they do want to bank their speech, we should encourage them to start immediately. So people with MND who were in our group said they're always hoping that they're going to be the person that it's going to be really slow progressing and they're going to be really stable for a long time. But we have seen other people go before them and how their speech has deteriorated, and maybe if they put it on the long finger, their speech might go downhill and they don't get such a good outcome. So they were giving us permission to say, right, you've decided you're going to do it, let's make a plan. They also thought it was quite helpful for an SLT to kind of help them with a time frame of, you know, we are going on holiday in a couple of weeks. When you come back, how about you do it in those 2 weeks, or try get it done through the month of October, so it doesn't hang over them for a long time and become a bit of a chore, that they just do it, get it done, and then it's there and they can forget about it. In the resources on the RMN website, there is a handout specific on voice banking, and there's an overview of some of the voice banking companies, and they are always being updated. And so Kira and Nicole in the CRC who are involved in making these handouts have already started on updates. So we're hoping to get the updates up by the end of October. Just as an overview of the services that are there, today we're mostly focusing in on Speak Unique. There are a range of services. This isn't all the services that are out there, but just focusing on Speak Unique, they've got 3 options. They have Voice Build, which is the traditional voice banking for somebody who has clear speech. They have Voice Repair for people with dysarthria, and they offer a voice design service for people who might want to use recordings. You need a laptop or a computer, and you need to record a minimum of 150 sentences. So that will take about 45 minutes. And ideally, if someone can keep going, they record up to the maximum of 300. So that's about an hour and a half. I Will Always Be Me is a service that the IMNDA are going to launch next month at the AGM. And it's a slightly different way of recording. I Will Always Be Me is the title of a short book about the experience of having MND. So you can go to the I Will Always Be Me website. People can read themselves doing a voiceover of the book and just save that as is. They can download it, send it to people if they wish to. But they can also then use that as the voice sample that Speak Unique will use to make a voice bank voice for them. So the I Will Always Be Me is specific to people with MND. It can be done on a smartphone, which Speak Unique can't. Most voice banking, you need to do it on a laptop, so it does have that advantage. But because it's only 20 minutes of recording, you do get a slightly more generic voice from it. So generally with voice banking, the more of a sample of the person's voice you can provide, the more like them it's going to be. So 20-minute recording would be good for somebody who's got very low energy or is progressing very fast. But if they have very clear speech and they're able to do more of a sample of the 300 phrases, there's no reason why they couldn't record the book too, but I would direct them to Speak Unique. With the other companies, just to point out, with Speak Unique, they only provide voice banking in English. So Acapella, we have a product called My Own Voice, and they have multiple, a lot of the European languages. And that is, as the final product is compatible with a lot of communication devices. There's also a couple of others at the end there that have other languages, but the Sarah Voice Me one doesn't work on quite as many systems as the Acapella one does too, but it is a lot more expensive. So the first port of call would be Speak Unique, but if there's a reason why somebody might want to do a different language, you've got Acapella. So with voice banking, you need a laptop or desktop for most of the options. You need an internet connection because it's done over internet. The person needs to make an account for themselves with an email address. So it should be their own email address. So if you're an SLT or a healthcare professional helping them, they should use their own address. They'll need a microphone headset and a suitable space to record. So in terms of recording space, should be a quiet room, low noise in the background. So if someone has a large open plan kitchen and sitting room that's got tiles everywhere and it's really echoey, it's not a great place. If they have maybe a box room or an office that has lots of soft furnishing like carpets, it'd be better. Ideally, if we would usually tell people don't sit down and record all in one go, because anyone's voice is going to get tired, and your resulting voice will only be as good as the recordings you put in. So to break it into chunks, and ideally then you would use the same computer and record in the same room and the same microphone each time you do it, so it's consistent. Sometimes that's not always possible, but if it is possible, you'll get a better result. And then it's good to listen back and see how they sound. So you're not going to listen to every single phrase, but Speak Unique would say, listen to the first 5, make sure everything's sounding good, and then listen in every 20 sentences. In terms of microphones, headset microphone is recommended. So a plug-in microphone is always better because you get better audio quality and you get less background noise. And the headset ones are better than a desktop one because they are very stable placement of the person's mouth. There's lots of reliable brands, some of them like Plantronics and Jabra are more expensive, and Logitech are very reliable ones. A lot of people now have some kind of headset in their house for gaming. It's good to check that it's not Bluetooth because they don't work as well with the systems. They need a plug-in one. So USB is best. Speak Unique will work with a jack connector either. And I just gave some examples there of the Logitech ones. So that's the end of the general information before we dig into Speak Unique. So we might check if there's questions, and so Paula, come on there if you want to tell people anything, Paula, about the IMNDA stock of the microphones or the equipment in general.
Yes, absolutely. I'm on. Can you hear me here?
Yeah.
Great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Yeah, thanks, Lesley. That was really interesting. Even for myself and my colleagues, we learn something new every day because it's changing all the time or it's evolving. So at the moment, just in regard to Speak Unique and Model Talker and I Will Always Be Me, we are funding all of those 3 apps. So that's not a problem if anybody wants to come forward. We will also, if somebody needs a headset, we have headsets on order. We should have them in the next few days. And Logitech are the ones that we're providing at the moment because they work. And if anything works, then that's perfect for us. At the moment also, we seem to be having a up and down request for voice recorders. So I'm not sure if it's the fact that maybe SLTs think that maybe the recorder and the Speak Unique go together. They don't. Speak Unique is worked on a desktop or a laptop with the headset. The recorder, as Lesley said earlier on, is for the voice, for the message banking as opposed to voice banking. So if anybody wants to go and ask questions, I think they might come up with your on your side there, Lesley. Earlier on, I couldn't answer because somebody couldn't hear the sound, but I think that was because on our part, our video with Paul, the sound wouldn't work. So sincere apologies about that.
So there's one question there about someone with a cognitive impairment.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing voice banking, you are usually reading a sentence off the screen. So you get one sentence, you read that sentence and move on to the next one. So as long as the person can read what's there, and if they have any kind of reading difficulty, if they have somebody helping them, they could verbally read the sentence, and if they can remember that sentence to speak it back. So you don't have to remember any chunks. So technically, yes, you could do voice banking. One of the reasons for doing voice banking is kind of the quality of life aspect and the person identifying with that voice. So the factor would be, well, is that as important to that person? Do they have that on their radar as something important? If they may do, but it's worth checking because it is a bit of work to do, but they can certainly follow the process. They might need somebody with them to help them. I'm just going to check here for anything else.
I see one there from Rachel. Will I answer that, Lesley?
Oh, yeah.
Rachel is asking, she normally refers to the CRC at the point of recommending message banking or voice banking. CRC are great and we're so delighted to have them, support us. But if you know what you're doing with speech, they don't have to go to the CRC. The initial starting would be to try and do the voice banking or the message banking. And then later on, if they need the high-tech ACC equipment, that can be linked in. So I would start, unless their speech is gone or something, I think just start off with the idea of voice banking. I hope that helps.
And the sub question there is voice or message banking best. Probably voice repair would be best, and message banking, you can do message banking for as long as when you play back the message it's intelligible. So a person might want to do both. When you do voice repair, because your recordings are blended with somebody else's, it doesn't sound quite as like you. So the idea with the message banking is that it is exactly as you record. It's not an electronic version, but then when the person hears it, they are going to hear the dysarthria in their speech. So it could be worth just doing a couple of sample recordings, listening back and seeing, does the person kind of feel like that's me when they hear it, and are they happy with the quality? But you could do both. You could do either message banking or voice repair. It just kind of comes down to what the person themselves wants to do. Both are options.
There's a very interesting question there from Caroline McLaughlin in regards to the guidance on what happens to somebody's voice after RIP. We are still working on this with Speak Unique for sure. Have you any ideas, Lesley, about this, or are we still kind of in no man's land? We don't have answers yet about this.
We're a little bit in no man's land because
Yeah.
there's nothing formal. I think the companies are very aware of, you know, what happens in life with, you know, when somebody does pass away and how important it is to have those recordings. So they do tend to be good about it and be as helpful as they can. One thing that can be useful, when myself and Kira were working on our toolkit documents, we made a document to write down passwords, because hopefully there's a very long time between somebody recording and needing it, and having the password written down somewhere is good. But we also put on it a name of somebody that the person can nominate to access their account on their behalf. So maybe having somebody just writing that down could be a good backup to say this person was happy to share the recordings with their family if they can't access them at this point. And so the answer is technically there's nothing formal, but I think the companies will share the recordings if they can.
There's a question there, Lesley, have you ever used voice banking for other diagnosis?
Yes, it does tend to be most popular amongst people with IMND, because I think they're the most aware of how rapidly progressive their speech is. Done it with somebody with primary progressive aphasia. It was a gentleman who had a daughter with an intellectual disability, and he felt it was very important for her to be able to hear his voice, and that worked quite nicely. And people with MS don't tend to be as interested in it, but some people with multi-systems atrophy have done it, and their society actually funded as well. The UK MSA Society were funded for people in Ireland. So it can be done by anybody. I know there's, I haven't done it myself, but there's a bigger group of people who maybe are people who have laryngeal cancer, and they're interested in doing it as well.
I don't see any more questions. Anybody else have any more questions?
Okay. And just going back to Rachel, yes, the CRC waitlist, it is long. So what they recommend is to send in an initial referral that you say on it that the person has started doing voice recordings, so that they have that on file. It's not necessary to wait for them to become involved to get the person recording. It's better if you can to start going. If you're not sure of how to do it yourself, if you send Kira or Nicole an email, they will usually be able to you know, give you some support on how to get the person started, because starting as soon as you can is good. And then when it gets to the point that they actually get assessed and they have a device, all that's ready to go and be uploaded, and their technicians can support with that. And someone with frontotemporal dementia, again, it goes back to probably the other aspects of what's their attention span, maybe to do it in small chunks, reading off the screen. But a lot of it comes back to motivation. With FTD, apathy can be one of the symptoms. So a person might not have the motivation to want to sit and give the time to recording, or have really be able to get their head around what would be the impact of having this. If they can and they're willing to do it, then great. But again, they might just need support from somebody else.
Just to pop in there, Lesley, another thing is a lot of or some SLTs will say to me, oh, her voice is nearly gone at this stage, or his voice. It's fine if a family member wants to do this, the voice banking. You know, like I sound like my sister on the phone, she sounds like me. I'm sure it happens in a lot of families. So it would be best to do it that way, instead of being sad 6 weeks later when the person can't speak at all and they have nothing. So that's also allowed on Model Talker and Speak Unique. Obviously, and I will be me. You can use somebody else's voice. It's not a problem.
Yeah, and sometimes it's called voice banking by proxy, where you nominate someone else to do it for you.
Yeah.
There's a question there about would you typically discuss voice banking in clinic and have them completed at home in their own time? Typically, yes. If the person is comfortable with the technology, it's relatively straightforward. It tends to work better because then a person can do it in their own time in small chunks. If you have someone with a family member who's just looking for something to help, you know, it's so frustrating sometimes for family. They'll do anything to help. There'll usually be somebody who's happy to, you know, get the headset and set up the laptop. So it's a really good thing that people can do. And sometimes people, if they are a little bit unsure about the technology side of it, I have done it in a clinic room with people, and I was a little bit wary of, you know, as you can imagine, a clinic room where everything's sterile isn't your best scenario for environment, and it's worked out fine. And sometimes that's the way of it. You've got somebody who's kind of, it's dragging on where they're thinking, will I, won't I, will I? And you say, why don't you just come in and we'll do some recording, we'll book in 3 sessions and we'll get it done, and then we don't have to think about it anymore. And it's worked quite nicely in that way. So usually people will do it by themselves, but sometimes it's an SLT. I would have done it with people too. Okay, I'm going to move on to Speak Unique. We don't have a huge amount of time left, so we'll just kind of go through some of the systems. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second on the website. Okay, so hopefully you can see that screen there again. So on the Speak Unique website, you can log in quite easily. So I'm just going to do a demo one. To agree, begin registration. So when you sign in, it will ask for some information. I don't want to join the marketing list, so I'm not going to check that. When you get to this point, it will ask voice build, voice repair, voice design. So if a person does voice build, but they do have dysarthria, the company can switch it for them later. They wouldn't automatically do it, but they might contact the person and say, we have noticed that your speech isn't as precise as it could be. Would you like us to do blending? They can do that very easily once the recordings are done. So even if someone picks voice build and it wasn't the ideal one for them, that's fine. They can be changed afterwards. So if you're someone with IMND, you'll be asked about what is your medical, or anyone with what is your diagnosis, when were you diagnosed? So you have to put in something here. What's your date of birth? Let's put random ones over here. And gender, they ask the gender question because it helps them to match donor voice. So then it will ask about country. So we have Ireland here and a region. So some accents, like say for me, I initially grew up in Offaly, in Clara. All my family are from Offaly. Then we moved to Bray. I went to the same school as Katie Taylor, so I should have a mix of Shane Lowry and Katie Taylor, but I think we cancelled each other out. So my accent isn't a typical one, but you can put in if you have any other accent influences here, and that just helps them again to get the voice as precise as possible. So once you're signed up, you don't have to go and verify anything. You don't have to go out of here. You can start recording immediately. So they give you an option. You can watch this video, and they give you some tips for the environment or the room where you're recording. And then what they say is to position your microphone on your jawline. So not too low, not too high, but sometimes you have to play around with it a little bit when you get started. You can go in and pick a script. So this is just to hold the interest of somebody. If you go into any of the categories, there's a different reading level. I would go for as easy as possible. And I would say from person who asked, have I done this with someone in the clinic? We read The Hanging Stranger, and I would avoid that at all costs. It was an awful book about actually someone being hung. But going for easier rather than the harder, because even at the easier level, some of the vocab is a little bit tricky. Some of the words you might need to repeat. So I'm just going to click on that one because I'm avoiding The Hanging Stranger. So they say, get somewhere stable, have a glass of water, a cup of tea. That's definitely a good idea. So to have sips as you go. So then when you get to this point, it says that we don't have a microphone. So something like your USB microphone, we need to plug it in. Get permission to use it. So So when you're on this screen, you see there's a few choices of microphones, so you have to actually click on one. If you hit continue, it won't know. So I'm going to click on the top one, continue, and then you're straight into the recording screen. So that's all the person has to do to get started with their recording. And then you see this record button, so you press the record button. It's not working for me there because of in this moment. Once you hit record, you get a red box like here, around here. So the person says their sentence and then it stops. And then that's the same thing that you do for each sentences. For each sentences, so you see here, so this is sentence 1 of 50, and it gives you progress bar, and as you go, it'll show the progress, and at any point the person can save and log out. So I'm going to switch.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so this is the same with the recording. This is the bar over here that shows you if it's yellow, and if it gets red, it's too high. And then this is the error message, too close to your mouth. And then this one is saying it's too quiet. So they'll tell you how you're going. The first 27 sentences are all the same for everybody. They've got all the English phonemes that a person needs. And then when you get to about 28, it's where your book starts. So you need to read the title of the book. Often people aren't sure of that and they don't, they skip over that. I don't read, but that is one of your phrases. And then when you get to 150, that's the minimum number that needs to be recorded. And then when you go on to 151, you can see now you have a save and submit. So from this point on, at any point, the person can stop and have their voice built. So the progress at 150 was at 100. And then when you go on, because you can do up to 300, the progress bar goes back. But you have save and log out, and you can come back and record more or save and submit. So this is the same here, you've gotten back to 300 and it's 100%. So once you hit submit, you get a message here that says that you've submitted it, so you know that it's gone in. And then when you log back in again, you get this message saying you'll be notified by email when your voice is ready to listen to. So the person who's doing the voice banking will get this message from Speak Unique saying your voice build is ready, and they can click on and listen to ready to listen. And then it gives you for voice build, which is their voice banking, it gives you a list of sentences that you can play. If the person has done voice repair, it's slightly different. They give 5 sample voices. So because they're blended with someone else, it's not exactly that person. So they might want to pick ones of different pitch or volume. So there's 5 different sounding voices with the voice repair. So on this screen, it is important to highlight that you can scroll down. And if you scroll down, if the person, sorry, go back, if the person isn't happy with the voice. They say don't finalize it, tell Speak Unique, because there are things they can do to change it somewhat. So to contact them at their support email, and they may be able to change it. If they are happy, then they can hit apply for funding. So when you hit apply for funding, you get a list of funders. And again, if you scroll down the page, it takes you down to the IMNDA one, and if you hit apply, it takes you into this screen. So this is the screen where the person who's done the voice banking puts in their details, and then they also put in the name of a healthcare professional who is endorsing that the person has done voice banking as a person MD. So Paula, do you want to come in on that again and say what should happen then next when those emails are automatically created?
Yes, absolutely. Hi again, everybody. As you can imagine, we're absolutely thrilled that we've been accepted for funding with Speak Unique. That took about 6 months, only 6 months. So we did our first apply for funding this morning. So you need to bear with us a little bit because we're not sure exactly how, basically, if you're an SLT and you have your client's details and you apply for funding, Speak Unique will email you and me at the same time. And I just say, yes, I've cleared it. Now, as I say, we did our first one this morning, so I'm not sure yet if or we may have teething problems, but so far so good. Lesley is showing you there, it says you have submitted an application for funding, and then I would imagine within 24 hours it'll come back and say your funding has been approved. So the funding is coming through the IMNDA and goes into our account system. A few of the SLTs that are on here at the moment will remember a few days ago or even a couple of weeks ago where we had to personally go into the client's login account, put in the details, and with passwords and emails being so case sensitive, it might take a week or 2 weeks to get somebody's email or password correct. So that's something as well to be fairly careful of. So yeah, from this morning on, it will be this way via Speak Unique, and they will email me and they will email the SLT who is requesting. So you have to go ahead for that going forward.
Okay. Here. So
yeah.
When it's all done and finished, person, sorry, this is a bit fuzzy, this is from Speak Unique.
Oh, yes.
The person will get this email and it will have their, once they have their login details, that's good. And then they get this code. And then just very briefly, because I know we're pressed for time now, but in terms of using your Speak Unique voice, if somebody is using it on an iPad that the IMNDA have provided, Predictable and Speak Unique app are the most commonly used ones. So if you want to use it on Speak Unique, you download the app, hit login, and then you have your same email address and password that you had for your account. And then there's 2 different options. If the person's voice is already ready when you open it, you click here on the white box, and then that number that was in the email should come up where you can type it in and hit select, then next, and then it will download that voice for you, and then the person's good to go. And then if the voice wasn't ready when they downloaded the app, you can download the app at any point. You need a username and password to get past the initial page, but if you're already started recording, you can download the app. It won't have your voice, but you can select a generic one and you can get started that way. And then when your voice is ready, you go into options over on the far right, then down to the bottom, my account, voice status, and then you can hit download. And again, it tells you that it's downloading and then the person's good to go. And then Predictable is more straightforward. When you open Predictable for the first time, the person has to make a Predictable account. So it's a completely separate account. They can use the same login details or different. But then when you're within the app, go to settings and then pick speech. And then you'll see that any of the companies that they support with voice banking, you can just pick on it. So select speak, and then your username and password that the person used for the account and download. And then that's it. The person is ready to go. So that's the services that IMNDA address if a person needs a headset mic to do the recording. A lot of people have one these days at home, but if you do need one, that's the address to contact. And then just briefly, I skipped over the voice design. So they say that if a person has old recordings that are based on maybe memos or podcasts or interviews, or some people have even done it where they've gotten their recordings that they previously did with Model Talker. They got the recordings from Model Talker, Speak Unique, and use those to build a voice. They need at least 5 minutes of the speaker talking. So that's not just a 5-minute recording, that's the speaker. When you take out another speaker and silences of them continuously talking, ideally it's 5 to 50 or 10 to 15 minutes worth of that person talking. And they can take WAV files or MP3s, MP4s. But if you've any kind of recordings, it's best to email them first, tell them what the person has, before they can do it, because it's a case by case, because you need a recording that doesn't have background noise or multiple speakers talking over each other. So with that one, I would always just contact Speak Unique beforehand, but they tend to be quite a helpful company and they will help if they can. Okay, I'm very sorry everybody for that with the sharing and the sound, and I'm just going to check for questions.
There's one there, Lesley, from Laura McSharry. Do you wait to click apply for funding until the person actually needs to make use of the answer there, Laura, is, so I'll read the question for everybody else. I'm sorry. Do you wait to click apply for funding until the person actually needs to make use of the recorded voice via ACC device? So when you're applying for funding, the voice must be completely finished. So sometimes when you apply for funding, if it's not finished and it's not completed, it won't go through, but actually Speak will tell you you haven't finished or you haven't submitted. So once the voice is definitely finished, then you apply for funding.
Okay.
Yvonne, is that, yes?
Oh, there's one from Louise Sterrett. She just said that she had done it with somebody or with a few people, and it's taken a little bit longer than what I said, taking 1 to 3 hours. So yeah,
okay.
Done. Person needed to go a little bit slower.
Okay.
Denise, hello. The person has set up their Speak Unique account and clicked voice build. Yeah, we covered that one. They can change it.
Yeah. So Yvonne is asking, is this webinar available to watch again if needed? And the response is yes. If you go onto the IMNDA website, it's on there on YouTube, and also originally, Lesley, it's on, where did I take the notes? Yeah, don't know where it is at the moment. You'll definitely find it on the IMNDA website, linked to YouTube. It is being recorded.
Okay, and then one last question from Moira about Speak Unique compatible with devices. If somebody goes to the Central Remedial Clinic, usually those guys recommend grid pads, and it's compatible with them, with their Grid 3 software. It will work as well on Liberator devices. I know sometimes we can refer directly to them, or the Tobii Dynavox devices. So it's very well regarded product by the companies that make communication devices, and it tends to be compatible with most of them. So it's a good option. So if the person does need eye gaze and they're using one of those Windows-based devices, it shouldn't be any problem.
Okay, Lesley, I think we've answered all the questions.
Great.
Dervla has explained, our communications girl. It will be on YouTube this week, on the IMNDA YouTube area in a few days, possibly next week.